What up, friends? Robin Black here. Enjoy the Hostilities, number 15. That doesn't sound like that many, but Mark, maybe we'll pull up our YouTube channel, and I can tell you how many YouTube videos in total we've made. It's a lot now, because this is what we do. Sit around, talk about martial arts and what we can learn from martial arts. That has become more and more important to me, is just what... not just, hey, it's cool, we see an amazing fight, that's awesome. Somebody did a spinning kick, that's cool. I want to draw some things. This is where I find philosophy of life, and this is where I try to find answers to bigger questions and bigger problems and challenges in life and all sorts of things, politics and food and everything. Sleep, relationships, whatever. It's all there. It's all there deep in the nuggets of the fight itself. Some people know me for my 1-minute breakdowns. I've now had them viewed over 120 million times just on Instagram and Twitter alone, which is unbelievably crazy to me. In those, I take a moment of fighting and I try to find it to its essence, either how it happened or what they were going through or the experience, and try to curate that moment for you. But this podcast is about all the deep thinking and analysis and trial and error that goes into being able to do that. You watch people do things on television or wherever, on YouTube. Somebody can play piano or do a kick or answer a question, and on some level we think they just can do that. They can't. It's work and study and sacrifice and trial and failure and stuff. And I used to do that in private. Now I do it in a podcast. So thank you for letting me do that and doing it with me. Today, we kind of break the podcast more loosely down into three segments, because Mark also puts them up on YouTube as separate things. But we want to talk about George St-Pierre today. George retired. He retired. Can you imagine retiring as the greatest ever in something? Can you imagine what that's like, man? Mark, like, seriously, think of that.
Yeah, only a few have been able to do that.
In anything. Think of it.
Michael
anything.
Jordan.
Whatever the thing you said you were going to dedicate your life to, when you were a kid, you did, and then you went through it, and then you were amazing at it, and then you were the greatest at it, and then you left on your own terms. Amazing. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to take questions, ask Robin Black, anything. Used to mostly be about fights. Now it's mostly about other things, which I love and appreciate. Then we're going to peek into Dustin Poirier versus Max Holloway. Second time they fought. Dustin won the first time. This time is for the Intercontinental Universal Planetary title or something. What is it? The interim. Sorry. Interplanetary. Hey, these are just tools, right? These are just tools. There's no point. You don't have to get mad about them or like them or dislike them. They're just tools to create interest and create conversation. And they're doing that. They're doing that with us right now. So I thought I was going to something called, going to King of the Cage tonight, but I believe I'm going to something called Fight Zone in Buffalo, New York. I don't know. Apparently my friend is picking me up and we're going to watch live fights. The time that we're recording this is UFC is happening in Prague. It's literally happening right now, but I'm going to watch it later. And we're going to record this and we're going to go. So let's dive right into it. George St-Pierre retires the champion. And and the greatest of all time. Actually, he didn't retire the champion. He gave that up. That wasn't the most important thing to him. Why did I start with an open statement? Just so Mark can make a segment on YouTube. But George St-Pierre he's a genius. He's my friend. He's somebody I've always looked up to. He's somebody many of us look up to. If you're Canadian, you probably have just a little extra thing, because there's something about Canadians where we're... he's
a national hero.
Yes.
For us, at least.
He is. He is. Like, do we have very many of those? That basketball player people like with the long hair.
Oh, Steve Nash.
Steve Nash, people liked him. What else? What else we got?
Well, aside from the hockey players that are like the standard,
right. Brian Adams. You like Brian Adams? No, I don't mean to laugh at Brian Adams. He writes some great songs. But we don't have a ton. Like
Grammy record artist Snow.
Yeah, Snow, outstanding hip hop and reggae artist. But no, we don't have a lot of heroes in Canada, and George was definitely one of them. So any of us who grew up doing martial arts, wearing gis and stuff, the guy even came out with a gi and a headband. So that's, we all love that. He also is very Canadian. He's quiet and humble and apologetic and polite. And it's not an act. It's just what our environment teaches us. Okay, of course I'm going to talk about George fighting in just a moment. Humor me, this is my podcast. George, to be a Canadian is to be in that environment. And when you should really see it. We're in a sort of a nice area of downtown Toronto. People will argue politely over who holds the door. And then when you bump into somebody, someone will say, I'm sorry. It's like, no, that's my fault. No, I'm sorry. Like, it's ridiculous. It's real, though. That's how we are. The way you are is created by your environment and the people around you. You start off as a little kid, and the way you learn how to be an older kid and then a grown-up is by modeling those around you. I am a big fan of Russia. I enjoy going to Russia. I've really made great friends with Russian people, and I love the Russian fighters, and I love working and commentating and analyzing fighting in Russia. I love it. They're very different than Canadians. They're just the same people. They have the same sensitivity, and we're all the same. Doesn't matter where in the world you're from, but the way you express yourself is different. And New York, very much like Moscow, New York City. The speed at which people have to move and stuff, they don't have time for that kind of politeness. And in fact, I was in Moscow with George St-Pierre, and I were there together, separate. I was there contributing a commentary piece and meeting with a fighting team about doing work for them. George was there cornering his friend, but we spent a lot of time together. And they look at us like we're weird, and my Russian friends said almost a little crazy when you're like, oh, excuse me, please, may I? They're like, what the fuck is wrong with you? And they're not being judgmental. It's just so foreign, which is how Canadians feel when they hear Americans yelling at each other on the street. Although both sprinkle into each other. So George is ultra Canadian. He's also a martial artist of martial artists. He's a learner and a grower and an evolver and in constant search of self-improvement. And these are the things that we look up to him for. So let's talk about today. Today is only a few days after the man retired, and he did it the way that he wanted to do it. So a quick recap. So I don't know what I want to talk about with George today, because I'm only going to do the podcast with going to fights today, maybe an hour and 40 minutes. Maybe me and Mark will hang out for 2 hours and 20 minutes. We don't have a plan. But I could spend all of it talking about George. We could talk about the way that he combined all of the different segments of fighting. At the time, it was quite a segmented martial art. Now, free fighting has become a blended art form. At the time, it was very segmented. We can talk about that. We can talk about the way that George evolved as an athlete, not a fighter or a combat sportsman or a martial artist, but as a pure athlete. We can talk about George's career. We can talk about avenging the only 2 losses he had. All of this we could talk about this forever. But I'm just sort of flowing with what feels right as I think out loud about this man that is a friend and I admire greatly. So we start from backwards. He retires on maybe Wednesday of this week, and he does it. He really would have liked another fight with Khabib Nurmagomedov. And this is a lesson that we learn about life. This is, again, fighting is there to teach us lessons. Sorry, I'm all over the place. I don't know if it's too much caffeine or what, but we learn lessons about life through studying these people, and you can do that through anything. I have a friend who plays a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, and he always talks about, life is like when you go into a dungeon and there's goblins, and it's there for you if you want. It's all metaphor for each other. George wanted to fight Khabib. Khabib wanted to fight George, and many people who are in the world of negotiation will tell you the only way you can truly negotiate what's fair for you or what you think to get the best that you can get is you must truly be willing to walk away. Not pretend to be willing to walk away, not imply that you would walk away, but you must be truly willing to walk away. So you say to them, I want to fight Khabib. I want to fight him for a title. And they come back and say, well, no, we need you to fight a contender. You're not going to do that. Like, I will walk away. It has to be that way. If you're going to truly be in a position to do things on your own terms, and most of us will never be in that position, not in the world that we live in. But George put himself into a position where, through his own hard work from the time he was a child, he found himself in the position to be able to do things on his own terms. I want to fight Michael Bisping. He's the middleweight champion of the world. I want to go up to middleweight and fight him. Humming and hawing and money and whatever. They come back and I know this because I was around. I was doing a documentary of George at the time. They came back and they said, we don't think, we're going to have to. And when I say they, there are many people in any organization. We'll say the UFC did X or, they did X. It's not a machine with a bunch of little automatons inside, like churning something and the machine makes decisions. It's just people. The UFC or Nike or Coke or the government or whatever is just people. A bunch of people doing the best they can. So those people came back and said, we think that it'll cost money to teach the audience who you are because you've been gone so long. George's people said, look, we want to fight Michael Bisping. I don't need to fight. I'm George St-Pierre. I've done everything I needed to do. I do love martial arts, so I would love to do it, but I'm doing it on my own terms or I'm not doing it at all. And before you judge that, this is what you should be seeking in your life. Don't judge it or be like, who does he think he is? This is what you want. This is what you want to create. This is the whole point of anything that you're doing outside of the things you do for love. You're trying to create a scenario where you can get things on your own terms. Most of the time, that's going to take much of your life. These things might happen in George's case, what was he, 36 or 37? And through a lifetime of work and accomplishment, at 37, he found himself in a situation where he could finally get what he wanted on his own terms. Now, then even your own terms have to change. They would then come back and say, it's going to cost a lot of money to re-educate the audience who you are. And there are people would then, and I heard this just lingering around as I did a documentary on George. None of this is inside information. Nobody gave me things I shouldn't have heard. I didn't read any secret documents that I found laying around at the fucking George's workout bat cave. I just heard these things. And so what you come back and you say, okay, that's a risk. You don't want to risk money. That's okay. Why don't you give us more pay-per-views for the Canadian pay-per-views? And I think this is pretty public knowledge that George received higher pay-per-view points for the pay-per-view sold in Canada. Now, if you think about that, his people are then like, we sure want to sell pay-per-views in Canada. Hey, Robin Black wants to do a documentary for the biggest network, TSN. Yeah, let's do it. So it's ended up being good for me too, because I really wanted to follow George. Because in following George, I not only saw how a super athlete lives, I not only saw how a good man lives, but I saw all of the business around somebody who had built a life to a point that he could live it his way. And that's all any of us are looking for. That's all any of us are looking for. If you want to be a billionaire, I'm sorry to say that's been taught to you by a culture that has sort of celebrated being rich. Being a billionaire is not going to be any better for you than having $5 million. Trust me, I don't have anywhere near either of those things, and I probably never will. But I certainly am not seeking those things, and neither was George. George ended up making a really great living because George sought greatness, perfection, improvement, actualization, trying to become the best human being he could, trying to become the best martial artist he could, trying to become the best fighter, a champion, a leader. That's how George got rich. But because now at this point he was rich, and because now he did not need to fight for money, for, purpose, for anything. Fighting was there. I can tell you actually why George wanted to fight. This is Michael Bisping. I can tell you why he wanted to fight Michael Bisping. Because George lives to train. George lives to grow as a martial artist. That's what he loves to do. And there's just the session of training. The only way to make it better than it is, as it is, training is wonderful. You can experience that thing as a child. All you want to do is do martial arts and learn, and George loves it. What can make that thing better? There's more meaning if you're training because Michael Bisping's trying to kill you. Each session has more meaning. So the very thing that he loves to do becomes all that much more visceral and real and meaningful if he has a fight. That's why George missed having a fight. He hates fighting. You can watch the documentary. He talks about it at length. I don't know where it is. I think it's on Crave TV, which is like Netflix in Canada. But I'm sure, if you go to, Caposa or like, Zombie Prophet or one of these like Twitter accounts and you say, hey, where do I find this? Those guys will all know, right?
Pretty sure.
Who else are some of those guys who are go-to guys for everything? There's a few of these guys. Yeah. You want to find something, they'll always find it. Then they'll even be posting stuff you're not allowed to post, and sometimes they'll post it or sometimes they'll direct you to it. They know where the shit is. Anyways, you want to see that documentary? It was a pleasure to build. But so George wanted to fight for that purpose. Doesn't need the money, doesn't need a legacy. That's a whole different conversation. We'll have on another day what is legacy and what isn't it. It's not what you think it is, not what they say it is. It's just what it is. And he could do it on his terms. So it's like, want to fight at 185, I want to fight Michael Bisping, etc. He did. He beat him. It was amazing. And I love Mike. I went to Mike's after party, not George's, because Mike's going to be a lot more fun even when he loses. And no offense, George knows I love him, but a after party of George St-Pierre winning is still not going to be as fun as an after party of Michael Bisping losing. And that's the truth. And plus, Mike's a wonderful guy. And as much as I was happy for George, Mike was the champion of the world. That was his lifetime he had dedicated to it. So George did that. There we were. Now, here we are again. If there's going to be another one, they say legacy. Again, we'll talk about that on another day. But, we talk about legacy. Tell me Michael Jordan's legacy, anybody. You don't know. Fucking tell me who paved these streets, on the street I live on, what generation built them. Nobody knows history, right? So we talk about legacy as if it's something that's going to last forever. It will if you Wikipedia it, but nobody is going to. And if I get 1,000 Americans or Canadians and I say, tell me about Michael Jordan, maybe they all say he was a champion, he was the best, but they can't tell me anything else. So it doesn't matter if you end up fighting Khabib or Tyron Woodley or whoever at this stage, 10 years later, they're going to say the same thing. George St-Pierre was the best. So that's not really that important. It's important because he loved the challenge of it. He'd never really faced somebody with the specific skills, they're truly that power grappling, that desire to manhandle you and abuse you. He'd never face that. I'm sure he'd love to face that. And I'm sure his team would love to face that. And he'd like to fight for another title. And if he can't, then bye. Right? And here's the frustration. Audience wants it. So there's 4 key ingredients. Audience wants it. George wants to fight Khabib. Khabib wants to fight George. But the company says you can't have it. Okay, we'll retire. That's what it is. That's the lesson here. Is if you truly put yourself into the situation to go after what you want, you must be willing to walk away for real. If you're going to do things on your own terms. George's own terms was Khabib for the title. This is what I want. This is what I have put myself in a position to ask for, or I retire. Not, okay, to have this, you must also do this. No, I'm not fighting another contender. I'm not taking brain damage. I'm not putting myself in risk. This or retire. Can't have this. They should have given him that, to be honest. It's the right move from every standpoint, business and everything would be, if the audience wants it and everybody else wants it. There's conversations about divisions and stuff, but tell me, instead, interim title of 2 guys, one's a featherweight. Like you're talking about people moving from other divisions to hold up divisions with belts they're going to walk away from. We do that every week.
And especially like with all due respect to all the current UFC champions, this happens in the era of where the title is the most meaningless.
Yeah. Yeah. The title
has the least amount of value that it has ever had right now.
Yeah, we're going to talk, if you're listening to this as a one-off, it's a love letter to George and appreciation. Then later in the show, in another segment, we'll be talking about Poirier versus Max Holloway. Wonderful fight. But yeah, they're different weights and one has a thing and one would be interim. You on one hand, that's how it is. On the other hand, no, we don't want George. None of that's right. What it roots down to is I make these decisions around here and I say, no, you're going to do it my way or not at all. Okay, not at all. It is.
Well, it's not to get off topic with George. It's just the idea behind that every pay-per-view needs to be a title fight pay-per-view. Meanwhile, the most recent one due to injuries and whatnot, Anderson and Israel was the main event.
Yeah, it was one title fight. Yeah, super cool fight. People liked it.
And the one prior to that, the last non-title fight prior to that was Anderson versus Nate Diaz.
Yeah.
Nick Diaz, which was great too.
Also great. So we'll talk about that a little in the Poirier and Max Holloway thing, but Max Holloway chat, early analysis. But but part of that at this stage of your career, who are you and what are you? Like your goal in life, our goal, all of ours, should, if we look at things and really are seeking happiness and success and that feeling of serenity that you're living your best life, as they say it, we throw that around a lot. Like somebody will be like, I went to yoga today, I'm living my best life. It's like, okay, well, that's pretty good. Or, oh man, we rented a car and went away for the weekend, I'm living my best life. And it sounds like I'm mocking that, but literally that might be like, what are we looking for? Being Beyonce or a billionaire that's not what we were put on earth to do. We were put here to like share ideas and grow and learn and become something and give something and influence people in a positive way, make the world a better place. That's what George tried to do. So, and just, there'll be thousands of not thousands, there'll be dozens or hundreds of people looking back at George's career at a variety of levels. He came up, I've got 2 breakdowns, there'll be a third soon on Instagram and Twitter, of him coming up UCC, and which later became TKO. That was the Canadian ones. And the first thing people notice on the breakdowns is on his back, it says goldenpalace.com. And it's like, literally, he's just a kid, and it says goldenpalace.com and henna tattoo. And he got somewhere probably between maybe $700 to about $2,000 extra. A lot of the fighters, the main card fighters, would wear that on their back, the same way that like a car will get on their hood, it'll say Snickers or whatever, right? And the same thing. And George would take all that money, every fucking penny that he ever earned, he always spent it on training. Training partners, training equipment, travel. He would make it, when he didn't have much, he'd make himself poor and have to work a day job or a night job to be able to have enough money to put it back in. He was never cheap when it came to training. Training partner needed food, he'd pay for it, even when he didn't have money. And now, when I traveled with him for the Bisping fight, he would have the entire team. He fed them every day. Of course, he doesn't have any bad habits. He's not a spender. He's not a gambler. He's not a drinker. He doesn't do drugs. I mean, nothing. Like, training and martial arts is his life. So he always paid for dinner. He always paid, if once every few weeks they went out to a nightclub to listen to bad French hip hop. That's what he likes. He would pay for all of it. He would pay for them to travel. He'd pay for their hotels. That's at the stage where he's very successful. In the early days, he would do what he could do. He would rent the car. They would travel together. They would go to New York, Renzo Gracie, John Danaher, and and Faraz would go too, because Faraz, as a black belt, still always learning as well. And they would always cross-pollinate. He gathered that information early. And in the early days, and trust me, this is not how it is anymore. You do not segment your fight up into, I got to train my wrestling, I got to train my boxing, I got to train my Muay Thai, and I got to train my Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. How am I in all 4? Well, I'm a really good Jiu-Jitsu player. I'm a black belt, but my wrestling's not that good. But, my boxing is, but I'm defensively. It's not like that now. It's all holistic. We look at fighting also. How is my athleticism? How's my speed? How's my vertical leap? How much power can I generate? How well do I recover? All of that was segmented. Back almost like Moneyball, if you ever watch baseball, and they look at in the early days, stats was so influential, and it still is, and it's still talked about that way, and still consumed that way. People who love baseball, one of the things they love about it is stats, but it never worked past that. And fighting has worked past that. It isn't segmented like this, but in the days that it was, George just wanted to max up everything. He wanted to run faster, jump higher, recover better, kick better, have a better understanding of timing, etc., etc., etc. Beat the jiu-jitsu guys in jiu-jitsu, wrestle with the best wrestlers, box with the best boxers, and fight Muay Thai with the best Muay Thai guys, and then blend it in the fight and in the sparring sessions. Again, that's not how it's done now. The reason it's all holistically done now, and it's all seen as one thing, Stylebender, if you say, I want to see how his wrestling is again. His wrestling is his fighting, is his kicking, is his punching, is his flowing. It's all the same thing now, right? You aren't better in one thing than another. Sorry. You will be sharper. There will be things that you are better at. Your right hand punch is better than your left, and you make space better than you maintain an overhook. And there are elements of it, but it isn't categorized that way. Somebody can be incredible at getting back to their feet and not all that good at being able to rip that whizzer out. Well, they'll work on that. But the flow of the whole picture is together. But the reason that happened is because of Frank Shamrock, George St-Pierre, Pat Miletich, people like this. People who said maybe they didn't know exactly where the recipe was going when they were stirring it up. At the time, they were like, all we can do is make all the ingredients fucking delicious. And so that's what they did. And George was the best at it. I could talk, as I said, I could talk about George forever. And we will much more. We'll find times in the future to go back and look at the things I learned from studying him, analytically and being around him. But when I traveled with him and when I have trained with him before, to watch him is to see what it truly is to be desperate to find your weaknesses. Like he wants to find them so bad. And over time, he doesn't have very many. Like it's not like, when he has control of your chin while passing to mount, threatening a choke, he slowly loses control with his elbow. It's not, they're minor, they're tiny. How well does he squash this or slide that? It isn't like my jiu-jitsu needs improvement or I'm not as good at arm bars. It's way more subtle than that. That's how deeply he's looking at it. And when he finds something that is not quite where he wants it, the joy with which he exists in those moments of discovering something he can improve, you see it. And then he obsesses over it. He was at a place where a lot of NFL players train conditioning, strength, and sort of functional athleticism for their sport in LA. I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head. And there was a jumping agility / direction change / explosive, energy transfer kind of athletic thing that he was doing where you would jump and change direction on multiple boxes, being light and powerful and agile, and there was a rhythm element to it. It's very complicated. It didn't look like much, and if you were a really high-level hip-hop dancer or maybe a drummer or certain people, that combination of tools and timing and rhythm and stuff would be easy. But George, even as a high-level martial artist, wasn't quite getting it, and he just wouldn't go till he had it. And it wasn't even like there was elements of joyful frustration in there, but for the most part, that's just the default thing he does. And he would have stayed there an hour extra if it took. It took him 12 minutes or 8 minutes or 13 minutes. Yeah, maybe a little less. He did it 12 or 15 or 18 times until I had it. That's just what he does. While I also traveled with him, he had found somebody in France who trains your nervous system to respond, because if it can respond a millisecond or two quicker to something that you see and do, well, that's powerful. So he trained with him. That helped. I don't know if he invested in the guy's company or what, helped move him to Montreal, trained with him. He had exercises to train where you roll your eyes in a particular way while stretching out your tongue to train your peripheral vision that he would do just while sitting around. And I remember when I was doing it, and it was like, and your tongue is sticking out, and he's like, no, stick it out. And suddenly it occurred to me, he's filming this and he's just totally punking me. And I'm like, literally, you got your eyes going one way, and he's like, if you stick your tongue out really hard, it'll stress the muscles of your peripherals to cause it. And I'm like doing this thing, and I'm like, George is fucking with me. And then I look over, no, he's not. That's literally what he's doing. He's trying to find a 1% improvement in his ability to see down here, out there, and out there. Because if you're looking forward, there's a point at which you lose sight of your finger. Okay, you can't see your finger anymore. If you look this way, you can. And if you're looking this way, there's still a point you can't see it. Well, what if that's an overhand punch? Well, George doesn't want to leave that to chance. He's going to train it so he can fucking see further. Some of that shit that he did ended up being myth or, misinformation, or if you do this, it'll make you better in this way, and it turned out it wasn't quite as good as the modern science, that's okay, because he was training himself to train himself. He was learning how to learn. He was, improving his ability to improve his abilities. That's all part of it. You never met a man like George St-Pierre. I know I never will again. And I'm very thankful that I've been able to spend as much time around him as I have, because it taught me incredible things. And George, thank you for a wonderful, wonderful career. Thank you for all of your fights. Thank you for your friendship. And thank you for the generous things you've done for me. And enjoy the hostilities, my friend. All right, what else are we doing today? Let's take some Ask Robin Black questions. We Ask Robin Black started out as people were asking me about fights a few years back. I think I did it pre our podcast when we started it. We were doing a little bit. It was
a Fight Network thing.
Yeah. I did it's kind of started at Fight Network. I realize when I think back, at the last 6 or 8 months of Fight Network, I started getting clues that things were changing. And I realized that, I had to start understanding how to work on my own, because if Ramdeen lives in Barrie, and if we, suddenly something had changed, or one person left, or we both left, or the thing, I had to be able to, and podcasting was becoming a thing. I didn't know how to podcast on my own. So Fighting is About Fighting, and Ask Robin Black kind of became training grounds for that. So now it's exciting to be able to sit and take someone's direction. Your question, I'm sorry, but I don't just straight up answer it. Like when somebody says, and I will answer this later, who's your favorite fighter? And I'm like, Cub Swanson. Next question. Like, answering it isn't so much always the goal for me as exploring it, seeing where it takes us. We hope to answer it if it's possible. A lot of the things here, what we've learned and what I'm hoping that we share, and some of you pick up and the occasional one of you see value in, is that we actually study the question more than just find an answer. Just knee-jerk answer, you can all do that. Who's going to win between Ben Askren and Robbie Lawler, and you'll be like Ben Askren, and someone else will be Robbie Lawler, and then you can, we can all do that. And if you just want my answer, that's cool. I'm very thankful that you do, but I'm always hoping there's something more there. Something, excuse me, I'm just getting over a cold. Something systemic that we can learn about, about process. It's all about process for me. So, but let's take some questions and see where it takes us. Thanks for listening to the podcast or watching the YouTube channel. If you want to buy a t-shirt, shoprobinblack.com. Some say Bink. Some say Enjoy the Hostilities. It means a lot to me. Thank you. And my 1 minute breakdowns, now over 120 million people have viewed them on Twitter and Instagram. At Robin Black MMA on Twitter and Instagram. I've got like 500 of them now. So where should we start? Actually, we do have some fight questions today. It started out mostly fight questions. Now there's a lot of life questions and stuff, which I really appreciate. I'm always looking for, once upon a time, if we were talking about life, and Rogan actually kind of accused me of this or called me out on this, we could be talking about anything and I'd bring it back to martial arts. Now we're talking about martial arts and I try to bring it back to other things. I don't know how that inside out process happened, but I think it's been a very powerful one for me. It isn't all about, it's kind of like when you get an underhook. Instead, an underhook is better explained when you say, it's kind of like life where, you're suspended from school and you need to hold on to it. Like I think that's a more powerful perspective. So that's what we do. But as a result, we're having long, interesting conversations about philosophy and so forth. But let's start with this one. I was going to go to it later, but I really like it. At the Queen_Regent. Robin, after 2 years in the Peace Corps, should I return home and go to grad school or sell everything I own and go to Thailand to learn kickboxing? Now, the short answer is sell everything you own and go to Thailand to learn kickboxing. That's the short answer. But the long answer is probably where we'll hopefully find something more useful. Because the real question isn't, should I go to school? The real question is, what am I hoping to achieve in the next few years? That's the question. Not should I go to school or shouldn't I? Should I learn kickboxing? Should I go on Tinder? Like, what are you hoping to achieve? What are your goals? What are the real things you want to achieve in your life? And if you said, well, I want to get my grad school diploma, or I want to like get my master's degree or whatever, if that is, I will still follow up with why. Why is that? What is the value of that? Why is that important to you? And if you just said, this is a goal that I set for myself and it's deeply important to me no matter what, then I would say, go do that thing. Why on earth wouldn't you do that thing that's deeply important to you and you want to do no matter what? But if that's not the answer, then I would say, as we look at it, what are you trying to achieve? If you're not sure, I'd say, well, what might you achieve at grad school? If your answer is a diploma, that's probably not worth much right now. I don't know. In the big cities, which influence the small cities later, massive percentages of people are preferring to hire people that, instead of going to university, they got applicable skills. We're living in a world where you learn things and get a diploma, excuse me, about things that don't really happen anymore. Almost everything, you're not learning how to function in the real world where this is how the world changes. So a lot of companies now, if it's about work and it's about what you're trying to achieve is a job or something like that, your grad school probably isn't more valuable than, let's say it's 2 years, spending 2 years interning somewhere specifically to do with the thing that you want to do. If it's necessary, again, if you say, I want to do this job and the only way to do that job currently is with this thing, then do it. Then do it and go to grad school. But I know that's probably not the case, or you wouldn't be asking me. You'd be telling me, I've always dreamed of this. The last step to X is grad school, so I'm going to do it. You're not saying that. You're asking. So we instead say, what are your objectives? What are you trying to attain or achieve? And in most people's cases, it's either I want to make some good money so I can X, Y, and Z, buy a house, have a car, have kids, get married, whatever. Or I want to find happiness and serenity and peace and purpose. Sometimes those two go together. Rarely through trying to find money and objects do you find serenity, peace, and purpose. But often through pursuing serenity, peace, and purpose, you find homes and money. Sometimes. Mark, is this making sense?
Yep.
It's like Aaron Pico or anybody else. Do you want to be the greatest martial artist you can be, or do you want to fight for and win a title? Because if you want to be the greatest martial artist you can be, there's a very good chance you might fight for and win a title. If you're obsessed with fighting for and winning a title, you'll spend so much energy on that, you might actually not be able to focus the importance on being the greatest martial artist you can be. Yeah. And again, it's the same thing. You want to find peace, serenity, and purpose in your life? Or do you want to buy houses and cars and objects and stuff? And I'm, before you say, Robin, don't be so esoteric, you must have money to do those things. Yes, you must, but you don't need 3 cars, and you don't need the biggest car, and you don't need the biggest house. And, renting a small apartment that you make really cool and you do the things that bring you joy in, it makes a lot of people a lot happier than ones with mansions and cars and credit cards owning expensive jackets that they don't like.
It all depends, like, what are you going to be supplementing your happiness with? Cars and things like that, or other things, and live, more modestly.
Yeah.
It all depends what you want to live,
Yeah, it's your life, by all means. And if there's a little judgment in my voice, that's something I need to work on, because it isn't my life. It's not. And, houses, cars, expensive things, there's a trend in people under 25, that those are possibly less of a priority. Certainly houses. You ask the average 20-year-old, you ask 1,000 20-year-olds, do you think you'll ever own a house in your life? And a huge percentage say no now. You don't have to Google very far to see that. Because what the fuck do you need a house for? You just need somewhere to live. It takes us back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If we have food and shelter, then we can start to look for other things. It's not like food and shelter will be better if it's caviar and a mansion. The next layers up are to find purpose and find relationships and find joy and find a job or a calling or a profession that you like. Now, it's important at this point, as we're trying to look at our two paths, grad school, which again, if it's something you've always dreamed of for whatever reason, examine the reason and then do it. Or if it's mandatory to become an architect or the thing that you really always deeply wanted to be, then do it. But over here, we didn't just say, go be happy. We said, go to Thailand to learn kickboxing. I think the fork of the two is, lean into jobs and careers for the purpose of income and houses and stuff, or lean into life for the purpose of joy and growth. Personally, I think you'll learn a lot from studying kickboxing about yourself that would give you more value than most schools give you, teaching you about things that probably are not super relevant in the way that the world works today, in the way that the economy works, in the way technology works. But you go to learn kickboxing, you live meagerly, you make friends, you push yourself through points, you improve your health, you become stronger, you learn how to learn. You learn systems of improvement. You have setbacks and failures. You learn maybe a new language. You meet people from a different culture. All of these things, to me, will have so much more value than going to get a piece of paper. Again, unless that piece of paper is a prerequisite for the thing, architecture, engineering, that thing you've always dreamed of doing. Anything short of that, you're going to gain more from fucking going and living in Thailand and being around all these people from all over the world sharing their life experiences as you see that the world around you is big and ever changing, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. But it all depends on the end game, your end goal, and the presence of opportunity.
Yes.
So if you go to Thailand and that's not there when you come back, then you kind of screw yourself.
You know what's probably going to be there when you come back is grad school.
Grad school, yeah.
It's probably going to be there when you come back. It might not be there if you take student loans and go to grad school and then come out and suddenly, Thailand.
Yeah.
So that's another really important part. This is something. So Gary Vaynerchuk, some people know his work. He's become kind of a motivational speaker, but really what he is an expert in tech and attention. And Gary will talk often about some of these topics. And I consume some of his work, but not as much as I used to because of how busy I am. I've also met Gary, and he's been kind enough to, introduce me to members of his team that have helped me with certain things as we've grown. And Gary will often say, even steps further, that the institutions of university themselves are starting to lose their value, or not starting, have already lost massive value. And there's lots of examples of this. But at the same time, do I want to tell somebody, don't go do this thing if that's the thing that they love? No. But, man, there's so much more to learn in the world outside of an old institution that doesn't seem super relevant. If you're currently in college or university, you don't have to drop out right away. And you also don't have to get angry and deny what I'm saying. You just examine it. See if that's true. Being at university, you know what's good? Getting laid, going to parties, meeting people, making relationships that have value. There's a lot of good in it. But we're talking about a guy who's been in the Peace Corps, traveling around. He's already been exposed to new cultures. We can go deeper into understanding different cultures and different ways of living and different ways of seeing the world. And you become more empathetic to how other people are when you meet as many different people as possible. That you can do in both. But for me,
well, I mean, sorry. That's what I was going to say. Like, that's why you need to know what the end goal is. Do you want to go and just absorb culture, train, learn the art, things like that? Or do you want to go and train and be a champion?
Yeah, exactly. And you may never fight. You could go train kickboxing, not for the purpose of becoming a fighter. I'm assuming you're not here. I'm assuming that you're not saying, I want to make a living fighting. Yeah. I'm just saying if you spent 6 months training kickboxing, for a lot of us, that would be a better learning experience.
You would gain so much more in life doing that.
Yep.
Yeah,
yep.
For sure.
And there was something I was going to say specific about Gary. Oh, I know what it is. Excuse me. Gary will tell you, and he's 100% right. I'm older than him. He'll say, if only you knew that at 35 and 40 and 45, in my case, I'm closing in on 50, that life is really good here. that you still have a long time. I'm only now just starting to hit my stride to do the things that I really feel like I was put on earth to do. Only now, just. And we've worked at it hard. Mark and I, digitally, different jobs, relationships, learning. I've made hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of the piece of art that I make. I'm only now starting to do it. But if you told me at 20, it might take you 29 years to be able to get where you're going, but you're going to get there and you're going to be able to live your life the way you live it, I would have been thrilled. And you need to know that. Like, whatever the long-term idea you have for your life is, if you say, yeah, but that'll take 15 years. 15 years is a short time if you happen to be fortunate enough to live to 70. If you're not, well, at least you did what you wanted. And if you are, 15 years is a very, very short time. Because if you get to be 41 years old and you finally are where you want to be, for the next 20 years these days, you can be healthy if you prioritize health. And for 20 years, you'll live your life exactly the way you want to live it. So you don't have to think about 40 and 45, but you should, and you can, and it'll be meaningful when you make these choices. 20 years from now, a degree doesn't have the value it had in 1985, and in 5 years it'll have less, and in 5 years after that it'll have less. And I'm not making that up. Don't get mad at me. There's a whole movement of people that see this, and many, many, many of those people are the people running the businesses of today and tomorrow. So I hope that was helpful, and I sure hope you start going to Thailand and start kickboxing.
Yeah, even just a little bit of helpfulness. I believe it's either Tiger Muay Thai or AKA Thailand offers scholarships to go train down there. So look into that. Don't sell all your shit, have a little bit something to fall back on, and look into all your options. The only marks 100 on everything. The only part I would disagree with is sell everything, because you don't need anything. Mm-hmm. You need to eat and you need a place to sleep. It's an off-topic thing. And there is a big movement towards this today, but people are starting to get rid of their shit. Because what the fuck do you need 90% of this stuff for? I like these pieces of art, but if slowly I started getting rid of everything, each one that I still maintain would be so much more meaningful. I've got 4 suits that I wear for work. I love them. They're nice. They're beautiful. I'll tell you, if it went down to 3, I would care more about each one. I would protect them a little bit more. You don't need all your shit. We weren't put on earth to acquire shit. We were put on earth to create and inspire and move and change the world. All right, next question. This is a nice question. At Matsuda Finesse, where does the passion for martial sciences originate for you? Well, thank you. Yes, I'm very passionate about what I do. One thing I think is important that I'd like to say, first of all, when people say you're so passionate about martial arts and life and philosophy and stuff, I take that as a massive compliment. I believe I only have one person. I only have this guy, so I don't have a secondary experience to compare. But I believe that I am not more passionate than other people about the things I love. I could be wrong. But I believe I just allow myself to express it more. I believe that's the main difference, is I allow myself to let it out there. Very early in my life, very early in my relationship with my wife, who I've been married to for 7 years now, and I met in 2009. I met her a little bit before, but so I've known her for 10 years. Very early into my relationship with her, she gave me what was a huge compliment to her and to me, a compliment as she saw it as a big compliment, and I took it as one. And that was that she said very early that she thought it was very powerful that I was never afraid to look stupid. And she's right. That is I live a pretty good life doing a lot of really fun things that I love, and we get to travel, and Mark and I haven't been on a trip for a while, but we got to make that happen and get out there and acquire some interviews and stuff. We get to travel and we get to do things. Fuck, I'm just looking at fights all day and, looking for mysteries in them and following my curiosity and peeling back more layers. And as I start to understand things, I never think, okay, well, I'm good at this now. All I know is there's going to be new layers to peel. One of the reasons I
I always try to dispel improper beliefs that we have and improper language that we use to describe them, is because the only way you get to astronomy is to first show people, look, astrology is bullshit. It is. We can still hang out and do astrology, and we can say, you're a Leo, you like having long hair, and you're really, bombastic. That's cool. But it's not real. Astronomy is real, as far as we know it. One day, some change in our understanding of the universe or our perception, astronomy will have to fall away, and the next layer will go. And that's how I want to look at things, and that's how I get to look at things. But, so she said that I'm not afraid to look stupid, and I'm not. I don't know where I got that. I don't know how I got that, but that is a real incredible gift, because I'm not afraid to try, because I'm not afraid to fail. The biggest issue with failure isn't the issue that you ran and you came in fourth. The issue is you're worried about how people judge you. You're worried about how the pack will respond to you. When we're children, we do all the things that we do as a way to gain favor with the tribe. That is what it is, right, Mark? Like, to be a kid?
Yeah.
Why do we play soccer? And if you're good at it, why do you like playing soccer? Because everyone looks at you being good.
Yeah.
Trying to be great. And the not great feels bad. You feel humiliated as if everyone's judging you. But I'm here to tell you they're not. Because they have all their own shit to worry about. If we all perceive the world through our own eyes, so we think everybody's judging us. But you know what they're doing? They're sitting there thinking everyone's judging them. They're busy. They're busy with their own shit. If somebody judges, oh God, look at that loser. That's for a momentary thing, and then they're worried about why their mother does or doesn't love them, or whatever the fuck is going on in their own brains. It's meaningless. And if somebody does tweet that you're a loser, they're a loser. Nobody takes the time, nobody worth caring about their opinion takes the time to do that. Right? No one if you looked at 100 people, nobody would spend their time, nobody worth caring about their opinion would spend their time typing something bad to somebody else out of jealousy or anger. So none of that shit matters at all. Right? And once that doesn't matter, you're not afraid to let shit out. Sing or dance or fucking say bink or whatever. Fuck. Try to fight and fail. The most humiliation I felt was during true failure in a fight. Not when you almost got there, but something went wrong, but when you just fully fail. Like your experience is one of failure. Even when, I've won fights and I've lost fights and I've won, contests in jiu-jitsu and stuff. Even when somebody gets you and you're passing out cold and you tap out in a jiu-jitsu tournament, you feel like you failed, but they succeeded and nobody's judging you. And if they are, again, it's only a moment, or if somebody's going to judge you in the modern weird technology, that's not somebody whose opinion should in any way have any value to you. They don't. And once you are free of that, you're free to express yourself. So am I really more passionate, or you're so passionate? Am I so passionate? Maybe. But I believe personally that's connected to the fact that I'm not afraid to express myself. That's what it is. That everybody's passionate. We're all passionate. And sometimes that passion's inside and you wish you could say it or sing it or enjoy it. Sometimes you look at the most, there are people who are quiet or, they feel it too. Everybody feels it. Maybe you block it or maybe you shield it, but it's in there. We're all passionate. We all have passion. It's what it is to be human. But if over time you train yourself to not express it, you're going to have to untrain yourself to not express it. You're going to have to allow yourself, encourage yourself. Then now I get rewarded for it. It's like if I was a kid and I did something, people give me candy. Instead, they pat me on the head and they say, I love your shit. Or they share it. Or I get all these compliments because it started out not being afraid to look stupid and it ended up, it feels great. And I'll constantly get encouraged to do it more. But the martial arts themselves, so that's passion. That's the answer to passion. And you all have it. And if you don't currently, you just have to get out of your own way. And that'll take a little time, a little emotional labor, but you can do it. Everybody has it. Everybody has it. But what are you passionate about? For me, it's martial arts, and that's definitely a part of this question. For somebody else, it can be woodworking. It can be fucking coffee. Man, you ever meet a real wine lover? Like, not just some crazy wino, like, who drinks too much, but someone who really fucking loves wine. Yeah. Listen to those people talk. Listen, look at the joy in their face as they're talking about notes of like clover or whatever the fuck's in there. The peppery touch of a baby's pinky touch of,
or when they talk about a specific wine, like this from this certain area. Like, their mouth waters while they talk to you. It's like, what the
it's just like, how the fuck? And I was, sometimes I'm working, but trying to wind down work and spending time. This is 21st century problem. You're still working, but you're trying to spend time with people and you're just wrapping it up. And during that period, my wife, she knows, you don't even have to ask me what we would like to watch together. Just watch whatever is, and often she watches whatever and I watch her shows if we put something on, or if one of us can just choose something. Other times we'll say, hey, do you want to watch? We just want to watch Gotti with Gotti, G-O-T-T-I, the gangster.
Oh, John Travolta?
John Travolta. Yeah. We didn't finish it because as soon as you slow down long enough, if you're busy, you fall asleep. But it was good. He was really good. But she'll watch cooking shows. And at first I was like, okay, well, I'm fucking typing or whatever. I'm like, okay, well, I'm not interested in this, but I don't dislike it. And by no means will I say, hey, while you're enjoying, a break, why don't you put on something for me? I'll just, it's on, right? Well, over time, I started to appreciate these things. I'm not a cook. I like good food, but what I like is how connected to these things these people are, how connected to the flavors and the textures and the colors and the combinations. And I realized they're just like me. I'm just like them. We're all alike. We just find that thing we're passionate about. But for me, martial arts itself, from the time I was a child, I was really interested in scuba divers, and gymnasts, and martial artists. And right from the time I was a kid. And maybe some is a fluke. Sometimes there might be other things that you like and you just get exposed to at the right time. But so there are elements of that. But my real connection to moving my body and it being something that I feel instead of just watch was doing gymnastics as a 4-year-old. Not even, maybe like kindergarten or pre-kindergarten. I was in little tumbling classes, and then I was a gymnast all through high school, and a decent gymnast. I took, platform diving and 1 and 3 meter diving, as well as Taekwondo, which is another question here. Did C_Luke Nicholson, did you have a favorite martial art as a child? Karate, judo, Taekwondo, etc. Mark, you can include that. Taekwondo. I actually went, and it was KS Cho College in Winnipeg, and I went, and it said Taekwondo, karate. They taught Taekwondo. They just put karate on the sign in case people like me knew what that was and didn't know what Taekwondo was. And I was a little kid and I wanted to take karate. So we went in and I loved it. But being a gymnast made me take to it much quicker. And if you ever, have a child that has an interest in probably any kind of sports, my recommendation would be gymnastics because it's the base of all things. You are learning to move your body and connect to its movements and understand its movements. And if you do it really young, you'll always be a bit better of an athlete, and that will pay off your whole life. If you really, members of your family are very physical, or it's something you think your kid really likes, or, football and baseball and things like that are a part of your town, and this is going to be a part of your kid's life, because we don't necessarily want to go choose what they do. But if it's probably going to be a part of their life, some people prefer wrestling. Faraz is a friend. His sons, I think, take wrestling. Wrestling and gymnastics will both have similarities. Wrestling will give you that tenacity, maybe that deal with resistance and pushback. Maybe you'll gain something even more from that. Both would be pretty great. And if as a child you could learn piano as well, it's like learning another language, and it helps you understand sort of putting together of systems and how things flow together. But I started as a little kid, and it's been my interest all my life, my passion and obsession. When I was singing in a rock band in my 20s, I still, got martial arts magazines and comic books and watched UFC events and stuff, but I did flying kicks as part of my performance when I performed. I would do 8 to 28 kicks and jumping kicks and jump off things. So that was always there, but I didn't really train for that period. So that was a bit of a challenge. My life is much better. I'm a much happier person when I train martial arts. But all I can say about it, other than everyone's passionate, you may have suppressed it. In my case, I had it. I allowed it to come out and then was rewarded for it, and it became a part of the way I was as a performer. Sometimes too, it's a way to train yourself to allow yourself to be passionate. Maybe that's part of it. But I'm sure I'm a happy person these days, and I'm glad I get to do what I love to do. At Love Sidhu 14, ask Robin Black, who are your favorite current fighters? That was very challenging. I like that you said current, because at least you limited it a little bit for me. There's so many. What are your favorite songs? I guess song is a fight, and artist and fighter are, who's your favorite? If you say your favorite artist is Jay-Z, you would say, what's your favorite Jay-Z song? Would maybe be your favorite fighter's favorite fight. I don't know. But who's your favorite artist, Mark? Do you know? Do you have a musical artist?
None. No. I can't.
Yeah, really. You can't.
I can't.
Do you have the one you listen to the most, or when you were young you connected to or something? But it's really hard. They're all so different. What's your favorite food? And it changes. What was your favorite food when you were a kid will be different than what your favorite food is when you're old. But each one's different. They behave different. They move differently. They express different. There's different emotion and passion and intellect and so many things that I can't even express. But Cub Swanson's always been one of my favorites to watch, and when I've got to know him, I really like him. I really like him as a person, and his goal to be a greater person comes through. The reason I started to really like him was just the brush strokes of his movement, and you feel at his best moments, you feel this visceral desire to do it. Combined with the technique and the training, there's a freedom in it. I've always just loved Cub Swanson's, the way he fights, always, and always will. As long as he fights, every now and again I'll go back and watch some of his fights, and he's different now than he was then, but you see the same artist, like name someone you do really like. Let's say that. Name a musician or an artist that you really like.
Oh, so yeah, let's say Nas.
Okay, Nas. How many albums approximately has he made? Key pieces of work.
I'd say about 6.
So 6 key pieces of work. The earliest one and the 5th one, very different, but undoubtedly the same guy. Mm-hmm. Because the path of it isn't always one on the next. Sometimes you go back and explore what you used to do. Sometimes you're reminded of something simple you did early in your artistic career.
Same thing with fighting. Sometimes you work with a different producer. It sounds different. You work with a different coach. You now look different.
Yeah, and sometimes. You become more a certain way, faster or more athletic or more flowy or more, improvisational or whatever. And then later you go back to the basics. You go back and you just fucking make a hip hop album again. It's really neat. Like once you can, these are artists very much. Of course they're athletes. Of course they're physical athletes. And of course fighting is a fight as much as it's a craft or an art form. But they are very much artists. And I say that, and it's not something we've explored as much as we did a year ago, but everyone's an artist. This is art. What you're doing right now is art. Your life is a work of art that you are constantly crafting. The moments of it, the moments of creativity. How you eat breakfast is expressed through you differently than through Mark. This is what it is to be human. This is what it is to be an artist. And so these people are complex artists. So, yes, Cub is one of my favorites. Michael Chandler is one of my favorites. I like, and I'm hoping to get to do some work with Michael Chandler. Some people know I've done some work for DAZN. It's DAZN. It's a the Netflix of sports, some people call it. And they stream Bellator, so I've done some Bellator stuff, and we're exploring me doing maybe something similar that I did with George St-Pierre, where I followed him around and created documents of his journey. Maybe today you would do many smaller ones instead of one long one, or you'd do both. But Michael, the root pieces of who he is deeply informs his art. So yes, he's strong and fast and muscular, and he's trained his body in a particular way, and he's super athletic, and he's all these things. But he's also who he is as a human. The way his desire to succeed mixed in with just being a good human being, caring and intuitive and curious about others and wanting to leave the world a better place, mixed in with this visceral desire to win. And to be respected and to be appreciated by his opponents and the people around him, and all of these things, this complex nature of what Michael Chandler is. And of course he's a brilliant fighter. When you watch his movements, there's just beauty in it, because it is, in his case, yes, trying to look for the right way. Do you ever watch a racehorse? A racehorse isn't just powerful. A racehorse is graceful. As it explodes down the track, it's graceful. And that's kind of how Mike is. Mike's graceful with the way that he expresses these powerful movements. And so as you watch his movement, and as you watch him grow and change and evolve, and as you watch him evolve as these days, you don't just see them train. You see a husband and a father and a leader in his community and a businessman, and you see all that. And that's all part of these guys. You could say, who's the better fighter, Cain Velasquez or Stipe Miocic? And it's very difficult to say. You can compare what's there, but you have to compare who they are as human beings, because that's going to matter when they fight too. Man, I hope they get to fight soon. Let's do that. Let's do that right now. There's so many of them. But I appreciate the art. But I appreciate the art more deeply sometimes when I connect to the artist. And they are irreversible. You cannot separate them. You know, who's your favorite fighter is different than what's your favorite fight. But what's my favorite fight will contain my favorite fighters. Michael Chandler and Eddie Alvarez? Fuck. Like, just
that
feeling that right now.
Cub and Doo Ho Choi.
And Cub and Doo Ho Choi. Yeah, exactly. I'm fucking, like, they're standing up. I'm going to watch those fights. And now I cannot use UFC footage now. That's a challenge. I do analyze fights for TSN, that brought UFC broadcast partner, so I get to use them sometimes in that capacity. But with Bellator now, I've got a free reign of a lot of their catalog as somebody who's contributed some stuff for DAZN. So I will be breaking down Eddie Alvarez versus Michael Chandler. Should we? Okay, so we got a TV tucked down it right here. And the challenge is to be able to get back to creating, and I've got ways to do it, and breaking down fights in this capacity. Let's do that. We'll go in and we'll break down. They fought twice? They fought twice. Yeah, how did they not fight a third time? And they may not now. Did they fight twice? Or did they fight 3 times? It's all blended to one for me. And please excuse me, I'm looking this up. It's all blended to one. I feel like they fought 3 times now, but mixed martial arts record. Also Ben Henderson and Michael Chandler. That's a really cool one. Michael Chandler he lost the last fight to Alvarez. He beat Eddie before that. Yeah, they had 2. That's right. One apiece. Mike submitted Eddie in round 4 by rear naked choke. That's one where Eddie's. I admire them both so much. And, if I kept talking, in that same handful of fighters, who's your favorite fighter? Eddie Alvarez. Also one of my favorite fighters. Those two together, there are very few more beautiful matchups than bringing those 2 men together. Very few. Very fucking few. Not just for fighters at their peak and brilliance of the action, but good humans, special humans. Every one of these men and women are special, and you bring them together at key points of their career where they've trained their whole lives for that moment. That's all special. But Eddie Alvarez and Michael Chandler, Jesus, like, unbelievable. Just so special. So we're going to go and and it was a split decision the second time. So 9 rounds, and they each won a few of them. So we'll have to maybe bring their whole, the dynamic of, we'll start with the first one and then we'll go into the second one. We'll do it. We got a TV back here. Mark and I are putting that together now. It's a perfect place to start. Why not start there? So in the coming weeks, could be next week, Mark's getting a stand, probably the week after, with all reality, with the amount of travel I've got. We'll break down Michael Chandler versus Eddie Alvarez 1. 2 of my favorite fighters of all time. How's that for an answer? Who are your favorite fighters? There's a few of them that are all in the same weight class, too. Jorge Masvidal, one of my very favorite fighters, too. Jorge never fought Eddie. Did he?
No.
Never fought Mike.
No, because he was fighting 170 at that time, I believe.
Yeah, he fights more often 170 lately. But Jorge Masvidal versus Michael Chandler or Eddie Alvarez? Jesus, it's crazy. Then, of course, Cobb, Demetrius Johnson, one of my very favorite fighters. Notice Eddie and Demetrius are over in one championship. I am currently doing some analysis work of Bellator through DAZN and the UFC through TSN. Not currently doing anything specific for one, so I better get on that so I can get to those guys.
They are also signing, apparently, Vitor Belfort today.
Yeah, Vitor Belfort, I think, will also be going to one. And Holly Holm, also one of my favorite fighters. Love watching Holly Holm. Again, you feel her spirit as well. And of course, she's very beautiful. Why should we ignore that? Michael Chandler, also a very handsome man while we're at it. Eddie Alvarez, reasonably handsome, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, a lot of wars.
Yeah. I think Cub's a good-looking cat. I mean, everybody's doing. You're gonna get pretty fucking fit. You dedicate your life to martial arts, right? There's Roy Nelson, maybe not, but while we're at it, love Roy Nelson. Spent the bus ride from New York to Connecticut with him. Very, very, very cool man. Very cool guy.
Freshly shaved
and a smart thinker. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's wrap up Ask Robin Black. We may have only done 3 or 4 today, but my voice is going, and I'm going to watch some fights. I thank you for pointing me down different rabbit holes. We will return for another Ask Robin Black, maybe 2 podcasts from now. John Jones, no. Dustin Poirier.
And Holloway.
Dustin Poirier versus Max Holloway. Early analysis? Do we do an early analysis of this? Just announced. We got to talk about aspects of the fight, of course. Good time. People will be asking. People already were asking today on Instagram and Twitter and Periscope and stuff about the belts and the weights and stuff. Apparently, Max Holloway is going up to 155 pounds to fight for the interim lightweight belt. If he were to win this fight, he would be the undisputed UFC Featherweight champion and the interim lightweight champion. Whatever, right?
Let's talk about the fight.
Yeah, let's talk about the fight. The only thing I'll say is we are now really fracturing off into 2 things. There are people who are big fans of fighting. People call them the hardcore or whatever, but they are your deeply connected fans. At this point, some of them don't care at all about that stuff, and other ones are frustrated and annoyed by it. Right? Yep.
That's it.
And then there's the other. This is the people who just kind of see a commercial and sometimes watch the fight, and that's who this stuff is for now. And I'm just going to take a second to throw this out there. Just a thought, just an observation. I'm thrilled to analyze UFC for TSN, the broadcast partner here in Canada. So I'm not trying to piss anybody off. I'm just throwing this out there. That if the world starts to segment into 2 things. On one of them, in one hand, you have people who occasionally kind of sort of consume the stuff. And on the other hand, you have people who are obsessed with it and they are your deepest consumer. In this case, we're catering something more to the people who only sometimes dabble in it. And the danger is that you irritate your what they'd call in politics your base, right? You irritate there's this belief, let's shift it away from fighting for a second. There's this belief by the NFL and by, Netflix and by, the WWE in many places, maybe not the WWE. They know what side of the bread their bed is buttered on. I don't think that's correct. There's this belief that, the hardcores are going to get it no matter what. That eventually becomes untrue when they think you don't care about them. But anyways, that's an observation from the outside, and it's not a UFC observation. That is an all industries and all corporations and all organizations that have an audience. The only way, and I can tell you this from fucking going from 6,000 people to 85,000 on Instagram, the only way to have a big audience ever, to make your audience bigger, is to give a deep fuck about your small audience. There is no other way. Not in 2019. And this will apply to everybody out there who has an audience or does something. If you're so busy worrying about making your audience bigger, you're going to hurt your audience. The only way to make your audience bigger is fucking obsess over the happiness of the audience you already have. That may have been different in the 80s, but today, if you want more people to see your fucking 1-minute breakdowns, Robin Black, then you be grateful for the ones that are watching it today. You be truly grateful. You can't fake that shit either. You have to just deeply connect to the people who like it. Not be sitting there worried, I hope I find another 10 million who like it. Fuck them. Let them find you. You only care about the ones you have. That's 2019. That's how you take care of the people who care for you.
And that's funny because you mentioned it, because when we were talking about it, when your Instagram is blowing up, you're like, maybe it might be the algorithm. I don't know. It might be every day it keeps jumping up. But it's like it all started because you're engaging with your audience. Like whoever would comment, you would engage.
Yeah, and why do I do that? Because I give a fuck. Because And this could be hard, and I'm sure it's hard for a big company. Mark's clicking stuff. I'm sure it's hard for a big company. It's hard for the NFL. It's hard for Netflix. It's hard for anybody with a huge audience. I'm sure it's fucking hard for Joe Rogan or Lady Gaga. Because when you have 5 million people watching something, it's pretty hard to think about them. They're so big, so many. But when you have 50, you can picture them all. Some of them are... This thing is getting loose here. Sorry, my apologies. I don't know if it's going to stay. Oh, well. It is what it is. You can think about them all. You can picture them. They're walking down the street. That's a guy in a blue jacket. His sister's name is Tracy. When you think about that guy, you're like, holy fuck, that guy took time to watch my thing and tell his friend to watch it. Of course, I'm fucking grateful. This is the world we live in. And if you aren't one of those people, don't sit around asking to have more people watch you do shit. Right? And of course, I'd rather talk about the fights. I always rather talk about the fights. But while we're on this topic, people asked about Tony Ferguson. Did, Tony turn down the Max Holloway fight? Do you think he should have? You know what? Yeah, you know what I think, Tony? Mark's adjusting the camera, but that's irrelevant to you guys listening on the podcast. We just don't have to have the third thing. I'll just wrap the end. Tony Ferguson should do exactly what the fuck is best for Tony Ferguson and or his audience. Real Tony Ferguson fans, real people who he's their favorite fighter, Tony Ferguson will say, what do you think I should do? And they'll say, Tony, do what's best for you. All these other people are like, Tony should do this. Why the fuck did Tony? Fuck you is what Tony Ferguson would say. And he should. The opinion of the outsiders don't matter. The only opinion that matters is the opinion to Tony, his family, and the people who really love him. And those people got his back no matter what. So the whole catering to some idea of a mainstream, if there's anybody sitting around going, I don't know what to watch, they're not the people that are going to make your business or your Instagram account or your fucking fight or, they're not. Because eventually someone else is going to hook them. The people to care about are the people who care about you. And anyway, so I got onto that track by saying that a lot of people who are deep fight fans find this stuff to be dumb. And they do, but this stuff ain't for them. It's for what they call a casual audience or just a mainstream sports audience, or, hey, we're coming out of NASCAR and we're coming into fighting, so they need a belt. Okay.
It's the same reason why rankings exist.
Yeah.
Just so people would have a compelling reason to watch. Why am I watching this?
If you don't know anything about fighting and they go, it's the number 3 guy against the number 1 guy and it's for a gold belt, They think that means something more to you. Anyways, it's not, we talked about this earlier. There's no they. The UFC, NASCAR, Coca-Cola, Netflix, whoever is not a machine with a bunch of automatons in it running it. It's a bunch of people doing what they think is best. And of course, it's an imperfect science, so they're doing the best they can. Fight. The fight. Poirier versus Max Holloway. They fought before. Poirier won. Submitted him. I think he got him on top, as I recall, was a mounted triangle, and he fucking fired up an armbar in there as well. And I don't remember if he rolled with it or he finished him from there. Do you?
Can't remember the specifics. We'll have to look at it.
He was, I'm pretty sure, and I haven't watched it in probably years, but I'm pretty sure it ended up stepping over to a mounted triangle, and as the arm's out, then you extend the arm. Pretty sick stuff, if I remember correctly. And there may have been, you can roll off from there and finish. There's a lot of different options there, and sometimes those options are forced. But Max Holloway was a young blue belt, and fighting was different then. It was really different. Can you tell me the year of that, Mark? I'm going to say 2014. I bet, yeah. And I would not be surprised if you tell me it was 2013. Not just Max Holloway was different or Dustin Poirier was different. Fighting was different.
It was in 2012, and he was 4-1 when he took
2012, and he was, I believe, 19 years old. He was a 19-year-old blue belt who was 4-1, debuting in the UFC against Dustin.
4-0. That
4-1. Yeah, 4-0, debuting in the UFC against Dustin Poirier, who already people understood was something, and had come up through the rankings of the outside the UFC world, and people were aware of him. There was a documentary on him as a young man, and Dustin's real, man. Is Dustin ever real? When you just think about the fight, it's really, really good. It's really special. The question of the rematch will be asked often. 7 years ago. Think of that. So I ask you to pause for a moment and think of where you were in 2012. Now, if you are 19 today, you were 12 years old. But if you're 39, you were 32 years old. Has the world changed? You dating the same person? Do you have the same job? Do you live in the same place? Do you see the world the same way? Did you quit your band? Did you start a band? You know, do you have a different car? All those obvious things are different. And then you start thinking, did I wash the dishes different? Speaking of which, I left laundry in the dryer. I got to make sure I remember that before I go to the fights. Did I, think differently? Did I understand things differently? Did I have a cell phone? How much time did I spend? Did I watch mostly TV and almost no Netflix? There wasn't Netflix, probably. You know what I mean? Just keep going and going and going, and then say, what do you think the bearing of this, of the original outcome will have on this? And the answer is nothing. It'll have zero bearing. I mean, if you really want to try to connect it, you can talk about, the experience or wanting the revenge and maybe being a distraction, or Poirier using it as a tool in language. But if guys of this level, it's essentially fucking useless. 19 years old, now 26 years old. Do you remember how different you were from 19 to 26? Remember how much skill you could develop in something? Somebody went to university at 19 and came out at 26 and they were a fucking doctor or a lawyer. You know what I mean? So there's no bearing. None. They're not the same guys. And we never make this simple mistake of saying Max Holloway's improved so much. Well, fucking so is Dustin Poirier, right? But it's not just improve, it's change. It's change. Someone asked, what will Poirier do that Brian Ortega could not do? And this is where this fight really gets interesting. And it's, again, where the conversation for me gets into something that's really useful for my continued learning. So why could Brian not touch Max and Max literally do whatever he wants to him? Why was that? Because he's a better striker will be an answer, but that's not a sufficient answer. That doesn't explain it in any way. Is it because he punches better, or moves his body better, or can anticipate better? The analogy I was just trying it on for size. A lot of this podcast is there for me to experiment with thought ideas to later narrow it down for my short form jobs and my 1 minute breakdowns. Excuse me. instead of driving on a racetrack, imagine that you had to learn to drive with all the cars coming towards you. Okay, so instead of driving on a highway or a 50-lane track, all the cars will be driving at you, and you have to drive and not hit anything. Some of them will be moving also, maybe swerving into you, maybe who knows what they're doing. How would you learn to do that? How would you learn to get good at that? And if you and I both worked on that, who would be better? Well, undoubtedly, whoever spent the most time and learned in proper ways. But over time, what we would start is we would start with those cars all moving slowly and me moving slowly. And maybe just me, you, or me driving our car and a car moving towards us. Maybe one car. We'd work on that for a long time. And then we would do it with 2 cars. And we would 2 a little faster, and 3, and then 4, and then a lot faster. And then over time, we would develop a sensitivity to what we were seeing. All that information would train our brain. So what they say in football, or Dom uses it when he's talking about fighting, is you can make a read, which is a pretty good way to explain it, is you read and are able to anticipate read the reality of what something is and what it can lead to. So over time, as the cars move faster, zoof, zoof, you know where it's going. You would start to see, based on small movements, where it could be going, and you'd move faster and faster and faster and be able to weave in and out of these. We see that in movies sometimes where people like drive into the thing, you're like, whoa, but if you did that for 10 years, you would be able to do it. And other people, if you asked us to do it, we'd be like, what the fuck, are you crazy? And you develop the ability to do it. Now, what is that? Yes, and some of the terms we would use, reflexes, we would develop reflexes, yes. We would develop that ability to sort of, clock what's happening and be able to, almost form algorithms in our brain of where it might move and find the track through it. Our brains are very complex things. We develop a mental skill. You develop a mental skill for seeing, interpreting, and then later for being able to find stuff. Imagine we have to then hit that car or slam our door into it or do something with it. We would add that on after. That ability, that cognitive ability to be able to decipher everything in front of us, then add the physical ability, and we're back to fighting for a moment, to manipulate it, put our bodies into those positions. Proprioception is a part of it. How close are we? Where is my chin at risk or not at risk based on where you can move? Because it doesn't matter. I can stand there and not touch your chin, but if I move, I can. You have to be able to read all those things, and all that information starts to develop into seeing and manipulating and understanding and sensing where things are. That's the best I can do. It's the best I can do. And Eddie Abasolo or high level, John Jones or any of these guys who are kind of have that feel. What I tried my best to do there, they'd be like, if they're listening or cared, they'd be like, not bad. Not bad. Yes, there is something. There is something here. It's more than just, playing a card. I'm going to play the punch card and you're going to play the slip head movement card, and that's okay. And then you'll play the pivot card, and then I'll play the low kick card. Sometimes we've tried our best to explain it that way. This is the natural counter to that, but that's not really real. It's not really what's happening. We're not playing you make a move and it's not chess, Physical chess sounds good. It's a nice analogy. It sort of works, but it isn't just now it's your turn. Oh, you played that well, or you play a queen, I play a jack, and somebody plays an arrow, and it means this. It's not how it is. It's a sensitive thing. It's a touch and feel thing. Sometimes a feel without texture, a relationship feel, a distance and speed and rhythm and texture. That's what's happening. We just don't have the words for it. We don't have the words for it. And I'm trying to get them, and I don't know if I'm getting them across because I'm feeling it. I've done it, and I've been in there, and I see it, and I'm reading it, and I've dedicated, now hundreds of thousands of hours, so I know that's there. We don't have the language to be able to do it. When Anderson fought Stylebender, what's happening there? Well, it's not like I played the feint card and you played the react card and then I played the this. It's not, the story doesn't lie in the choices of technique. And then I, hand fought you, and when I did, you pulled away and I got you flat-footed. Even if the things we're saying are true, all of this is a cognitive thing. It's a nervous system thing. It's a thing, it's a conversation and a manipulation between our senses. I don't think that sounds fantastical. I think that is, I'm in an ever ongoing quest. It might take me 10 or 15 more years to truly find the correct ways to make sense of that to somebody who doesn't, watch it that much. But it's going to take a while. But that's what's happening. When we say a push and a pull, or we say, engages his senses to make him react, or we say leads him into things. These are all good terms. I think these things all give us an idea. All of that is what Anderson and Stylebender were doing to each other. And all of that is what Max Holloway did to Brian Ortega. He didn't, move his head better. He did move his head better, but that's not, you don't need somebody to sit and try to do thought experiments to tell you that. Anyone on Twitter can say, wow, he moved his head and he walked him into, and he landed counters. And that's true. But how and why? Well, he was better than him. That's true. But how? In what ways? What does that feel like? What does it feel like? What's really happening? And it's these elements that when I try to fight Max Holloway, I get knocked unconscious. It's not because he hits so hard and he's way too fast. It's because I can't feel that stuff. I can't sense it. He can't necessarily explain why he can do something in such a way to get you to do something and walk you into it, and he couldn't 7 years ago, but he can. It's my job to do that, and I'm not doing a very good job of it. It's going to take me a long time, people like me, to find the way to do this outside of a long-form podcast that only a certain amount of people are going to care about. Our job is to eventually find the way to do it. But Brian Ortega just is too far from that level. So if you're trying, Brian Ortega, who's a brilliant martial artist, if Brian Ortega is trying to punch that man, and that man is swimming through, time and space in the way that he is, and this guy's just like, well, I take my right hand and I land it and I throw my left hook and I step and I pivot, and he's like, dude, that's 10 years ago for me. I float out here and I make you miss. How? I've been doing it for a long time. You can't explain it, but it's feel. And it's experience, and it's over and over and over, developing those inexplicable sensitivities to it. That's why he's better than Brian Ortega in that area. Brian Ortega's answer to that, however, has to be, in whatever way I have to do it, I have to get a hold of this man and take away the space for him to do this first. And he couldn't do that part. If he did that part, the next part would be, now I have to, through whatever tools and techniques and trips that I learned as a kid doing judo and as an adult doing wrestling and all these other individual martial arts, I have to somehow take bits I've learned from that and make him fall on the ground. We can call it a takedown, a trip, a throw. We can call it whatever we want, but I must take him off of his feet now with no space. And once he does that, then he has to keep him there. And once he does that, then he has to make him surrender the position and defend himself instead of getting up. And once he does that, he can do his thing. That's the shit that Dustin should do, can do, has to do. No, doesn't have to do. Dustin can knock him out just as well as Max can knock him out. He's big and strong. He can do it. But Dustin can do. The reason that will be easier for Dustin than it was for Brian is because he can also feel and manipulate and sense. There are key moments where he's drawing things, and in that chaos, he's not thinking, I'm going to ask for a left hand. When it comes, I'm going to slip out of the way and I'm going to land my right hook counter from southpaw. Then when it's there, I'm going to pivot. None of that's there. All of that has been learned in such a way that it just makes a flowing soup that happens by itself. Ask Poirier to explain it, or anybody else that does that to explain it, they'll say, I was in the zone, I was flowing in it, I could just see everything. That's the great one. I love it when they say that. They're like, I just saw everything, and just everything was landing, as if they're a third person. Fuck, that's cool. It's also very, very well explained, because in that point, they're seeing it as if they are a third person. They're almost watching themselves do it. They're watching it happen, which is amazing. And people have experienced this in their own lives in different ways. You play floor hockey that one day and everything, it's just, you're not even thinking, it's just happening. That's how these guys live in a prize fight in there. But if you have that highly developed, incredible sensitivity, and your opponent doesn't, you will in an area that you can keep it, or in a phase of combat you can keep it, like Max did with Brian, you are just going to pitch a shutout, and it's going to be brutal. Brian Ortega, incidentally, got to show heart and toughness and grit and will, and I admire him for it. And it'll make him a better fighter and martial artist. Brian would be able to run someone like that in the jiu-jitsu realm, in the grappling realm, because that's where he grew up. Dustin Poirier is very much like Max Holloway in that way. You know? Why is he so good? It's hard to hit. It's got, we may say, head movement or footwork. Those things are part of it. But it's the neurological, see the stimuli, comes to the brain, and an action happens by itself. That is positive for me. So I see, my eye sees it, and through my training, it makes me either move out of the way or make you miss, and then another action happens that hurts you. And that over and over between the two is happening. After the fact, sometimes we'll say, this happened, and then he got the block, and he bit down and did that. And that's not improper. It's just not the whole story. Because right away we'll say, well, how did he do it? Why did he do it? How did he train that? Why was he able to do that in that millisecond? You know, Paul Daly, I did a lot of breakdowns with Paul Daly and Michael Venom Page going into it, and Page won that fight. Close fight. But when I looked at Paul Daly, man, there were things that he did. One little reset where he would be not in position and then in position and hitting you, and his entire body would explode into the position to hurt you in less time than it would take you to get your hand back. He wouldn't just throw a punch. He would explode into a plant, into a delivery. And when I showed him that breakdown, I said, say, look how quickly and beautifully he resets. He was like, we train that. We've been training that for years. For decades, they've been just, you know, you're off balance, explode, bink. You just explode yourself because Mike or Paul, his best attribute is when he's in balance and he lands on you, you're hurt. And Dustin Poirier is kind of like that too. He forces his way, or he flows his way into balance, and it hurts you. Max Holloway too. Early analysis. It's a nice time to be able to go in and just play around with ideas and play around with verbiage and language. It's going to take forever. 10 years from now, I might not have any better explanation than this, but it lies in the neurology. It lies in how the brain is training this. Of course, the punch and the kick and the stance and the block are of massive importance, but that thing's already happening by itself. That stuff happens by itself. You don't have time to spy something and make a choice. These things are trained into you. And what's happening is the neurological, gather the input, create an action that is advantageous to you, and then build on that action while gathering other stimuli, allowing other actions to take place that builds and builds and builds until the moment is created and you put the guy to sleep. I'm super stoked for this fight. I'm losing my voice. That's the end of that. I hope that was of value. I know it's a different idea. I'm always going to push the envelope. I'm always going to try to find something deeper. To do that, I have to acknowledge that what we're doing now is not the end. It's only a doorway to new ideas, and to get to astronomy, you had to go through astrology and eventually go, astrology is not real. Astrology is just what we're doing. And that's where we're at 25 years from now. And then 100 years after that, we'll understand more of everything, about mugs and tables and fighting and viruses. And the knowledge that we have now will be rudimentary, which means that today it is rudimentary, which means we should acknowledge that it is, and acknowledge that we don't know where we're going with everything, and that be excited by that. If you listen to the whole podcast, we started with George St-Pierre. That's what excites George. is understanding that if only he would live long enough and be physically able long enough, he would look back at what he knows today and laugh and realize how little it is. And that would make him happy, because it would mean that he's trained and learned and peeled and examined and grown and evolved and pushed the envelope and invented the language necessary to understand the concepts. That's what we got to do. That's what we have to do. We don't have to do it, but that's what I'm going to do. So until next time, enjoy the hostilities, my friends.